I walked in expecting to see champagne and handshakes. Instead, I saw him in a tuxedo, kissing the bride. But the bride wasn't me. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved one. It started with a message. Just 2 hours before the event, he texted. Promotion dinner at the Fairmont Ballroom. Formal. Come if you can. No details. No excitement. Just a cold, vague invite like I was some acquaintance. But I told myself maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe this was a big deal, and he just forgot the finer touches. I rushed to change, put on the blue dress he once said was his favorite, and drove there with my heart pounding. The moment I walked into the lobby, something felt wrong. People weren't in business attire. They were in evening gowns and tuxedos. A string quartet played softly in the distance. There were white roses, hundreds of them, lining the hall to the ballroom. A young woman passed by me, holding a gift wrapped in gold. I asked her, "Sorry, is this for James Reynolds' promotion party?" She blinked. "You mean James and Olivia's wedding?" I didn't respond. I just kept walking. The doors to the ballroom were half open. I stood there, my palms sweating, my chest tight. Through the sliver between the doors, I saw it. Candles lit across the stage, a tall man in a tuxedo, and a woman in a lace wedding gown holding his hand. It took me too long to believe it was him. James. My James. Laughing, smiling, whispering something to the bride as the officiant continued the vows. His hair was slicked back the same way he wore it when we got married 4 years ago. The same tie. Even the same smile. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't scream. Couldn't cry. I stepped back, the echo of my heels on the marble floor louder than anything in my chest. I turned, walked away, then finally ran, past guests arriving late, past staff with trays of champagne, out into the humid night. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, not knowing what to do. Call the police? Confront him? Text his mother? No. I needed to understand. Not just what he did, but how long it had been happening. This wasn't a one-night lie. This was years in the making, carefully planned, fully lived, and I had missed every sign. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even cry. I just stared at our wedding photo on the wall. I wasn't ready to scream. I wasn't ready to fall apart. I was ready to find the truth. Because when someone builds a life on lies, you can't just tear it down. You have to burn it from the roots and watch everything he thought was hidden turn to ash. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every late night. Every muted call. Every time he said, "Just work stuff." It all used to feel so routine, normal, even. Now, it felt like a blueprint I'd been too blind to read. The last few weeks before the so-called promotion party had been more chaotic than usual. James was always busy, but lately he'd been distant. Not angry, not cold, just not fully there. Like a man trying to maintain 2 conversations at once, while pretending everything was fine. He started working late almost every night. "We've got a huge account to land," he said. "I'm this close to the top floor." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But there were nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and he still hadn't come home. Sometimes he'd crawl into bed with the smell of whiskey and something floral on his suit. He always said it was client dinners. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to sound controlling. I didn't want to be that wife. One day, I found a crumpled receipt in the pocket of his jeans while doing laundry. It was for a boutique I didn't recognize. I thought maybe he'd bought me something. My birthday was coming up. But when I searched the store online, it wasn't a gift shop. It was a bridal salon. The charge was over $4,000. I didn't say anything then. I tucked it away in my nightstand, convincing myself it must have been a mistake. A client purchase. A refund pending. Something. Anything. Then there were the dinners. One night, he came home smelling like saffron and roses. I asked what he ate. He paused too long before saying, "Italian." I smiled, nodded, but my gut twisted. I looked up local Italian places later that night. None served saffron. It was stupid, maybe, but it didn't sit right. Then the calls. His phone used to ring freely. Lately, it barely made a sound. If it ever did, he'd glance at it, swipe it away, and mumble, "Spam." Once, I saw the name Liv flash on the screen before he shoved it in his pocket. I asked who that was. He said, "Coworker." "She's annoying." I remembered the name. It would come back to me later. Every little thing that didn't make sense started to connect like puzzle pieces I hadn't known were missing. I remembered how he snapped at me when I asked if we could plan a weekend away. He said, "I'm under pressure. Stop asking for stuff." I remembered him smiling at his phone one evening when he thought I was in the kitchen. I remembered the new cologne that showed up in our bathroom drawer, the one I never bought him. I started checking his pockets. His car. His trash. I felt insane, like someone unraveling, but at the same time, something sharp in me was waking up. One night, I logged into our joint bank account and started combing through the statements. There were charges for florists, jewelry stores, upscale restaurants I'd never been to. a hotel booking under his name for a suite on a night. He told me he was out of town for a conference. There was no promotion. That much was clear now. He wasn't building a career. He was building a cover. I remembered the way he looked at me that morning, the day of his promotion party. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Tonight's important. I'll see you there." His voice had that perfect mix of calm and urgency, like he needed me to be there, just to tie off the lie. And I had walked right into it. I couldn't get her out of my head. Her face haunted me, not because of hatred or jealousy, but because she looked so sure, so safe, as if she truly believed she belonged in that moment, beside him, in that dress. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her, but I needed to. Mia had managed to take a few pictures from the hallway. I hadn't even noticed her do it in the panic. They were grainy, but one showed the woman's face clearly enough. A clean, composed expression, her eyes focused entirely on James. She wasn't confused. She wasn't guilty. She was in love. That, more than anything, made me feel sick. I showed the photo to someone I knew who worked at a wedding planning agency. Within minutes, she recognized the florist's design from the arrangements and narrowed it down to one local vendor. A few calls later, I had a name, Olivia Brooks. I said it aloud and froze. That name, it sounded vaguely familiar. And then it hit me. Years ago, when James and I were still dating, he once talked about a girl in his college group. A little intense, he had said. Always had everything color-coded. We did a presentation together once. He never said her name. I never asked. I had no idea she'd been anything more. I had no reason to suspect it. I searched the university's alumni records through an old friend who worked there. Olivia Brooks. Graduated the same year as James. Marketing major. Dean's List. Her name was next to his on one archived group project. It wasn't a casual acquaintance. They had worked closely. And judging by everything I was uncovering, that connection had never ended. Through more digging, I found records of recent property applications. A small house rented under her name, with James listed as an emergency contact. They had signed the lease together just over a year ago. The address was across town, somewhere I never had reason to drive through. It wasn't just a fling. It was another home, another reality, another version of my husband. I found travel receipts. A reservation at a coastal inn during a time he had told me he was overseas at a marketing seminar. A dinner reservation on a night he claimed he was visiting his mother in the hospital. Names matched. Dates overlapped. Stories unraveled. She'd been with him during our marriage. Not just occasionally. Constantly. Their lives ran parallel to mine, and I had been completely unaware. The birthdays he missed, the calls he ignored, the nights he said he was working late, it all fell into place. There was no secret project. No promotion plan. Just one long, uninterrupted lie. She wasn't a stranger. She was his second life, carefully kept, painstakingly built. And the worst part? She believed she was his only one. She had no trace of doubt in her face at that altar. Her world hadn't cracked. Mine had. There was no way she knew. No woman could stand beside a man at the altar with that kind of trust if she suspected the truth. She had built a future on lies he whispered in her ear while silencing his phone around me. He gave her the same comfort, the same looks, the same promises, probably in the same words. And now I wasn't just broken. I was furious. Not at her. At him, for dragging two women into one long fiction and making us both believe we were the center of his story. I couldn't sit with the truth in silence anymore. I needed confirmation. Real confirmation. Not assumptions, not guesses, words from her own mouth. I didn't want to destroy her, not yet. I didn't want to scream the truth into her face and watch it shatter everything she thought she knew. I needed to understand how deep it went, and whether she too had been living a lie. I created a new email, clean and vague, and sent her a message that simply read, "Hi Olivia. You don't know me, but I know someone you love. I'm not here to hurt you, I just have questions. Please meet me." I left a time and a cafe address quiet and neutral, the kind of place where emotions can spill quietly in public without making a scene. She came, dressed in a soft beige coat, polite but guarded. She looked at me with uncertainty, trying to read my face for any hint of what this was about. I told her my name was Anna, a friend of James, that I needed to talk to her about something delicate. Her eyes softened just a little. She nodded slowly. She thought I was one of his colleagues, maybe a concerned friend, maybe someone who knew something about him she didn't. And she was right. I asked her gently how long they'd been together. She smiled cautiously at first. "Almost 4 years," she said. "He proposed last spring." My stomach turned, but I kept my face steady. "Were you two friends before that?" I asked. "College," she replied. "He was always kind, always so driven. We reconnected later, after his previous relationship ended. I didn't think he was ready for something serious, but then he changed." I wanted to scream. His previous relationship had ended. I was that relationship, still ongoing, still legally intact. But to her, I had been erased, turned into a vague past event, rewritten by the man who shared both our beds. I asked her about the proposal. She lit up as she described a weekend getaway. He took her to a coastal town, made her favorite dinner, and got down on one knee. She said she'd never seen him look more sure of anything in his life. That weekend, he told me he was at a seminar in Seattle. I didn't tell her who I really was. Not yet. She didn't deserve to have her world broken apart in a coffee shop. But I asked one last question. Do you trust him completely? She didn't hesitate. With everything, she said. He's never lied to me. That's when I realized we weren't enemies. We were prisoners in the same maze, chasing the same man through the same lies. Only I had started to find the walls, while she still believed it was open air. He hadn't just cheated. He'd constructed two realities and played us against each other without us ever knowing. Every smile, every I love you, every shared memory had been duplicated, customized lies for different women, sold with the same conviction. It wasn't love. It was theater, a performance he'd rehearsed to perfection. And somehow, knowing she was just as fooled as I was didn't soften the blow. It made it worse. Because if he could do that to both of us, it meant there was nothing real about the person I thought I married. He didn't just break my heart. He erased it. I thought the worst was behind me after discovering the wedding. I was wrong. That moment at the cafe was only the surface. What lay beneath was darker, more calculated, and far more destructive than I ever imagined. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't pretend it was just a broken heart. This man had stolen years from me, and now I feared maybe more. I started with our bank account. Joint, of course. Transparent, supposedly. But now I looked closer, really looked, line by line. The monthly transfers he always said were for savings had no destination listed. I followed the trail until I found a secondary account I didn't recognize. It had his name on it, but a different address. Transactions I'd never made. Catering deposits, suit rentals, jewelry purchases. All recent. All expensive. There was also a vendor marked Everly Events. I didn't recognize it, but it looked like a planner or coordinator. I called them, pretending to be confirming the final payment. The woman on the other end said, "Oh yes, the Reynolds wedding. What a beautiful couple." My voice caught in my throat. I hung up without another word. It wasn't just our money. It was my money too. My savings account had been linked to cover overdrafts. Slowly, quietly, it had been drained. I hadn't noticed the red flags. Automatic payments here, bounce checks there. I thought I was just behind on budgeting. In truth, he'd bled me dry to fund a life I wasn't even part of. And the debt, he had opened credit cards in our joint name. I had never seen the statements. They were emailed to an address I didn't use. But when I finally accessed them, I nearly dropped my laptop. Thousands of dollars in charges, spa weekends, airfare, hotel rooms in cities I'd never visited. It wasn't just Olivia. There were names I didn't recognize, one in Chicago, another in Denver. They weren't part of any wedding. It felt like a puzzle I couldn't finish, so I did the only thing left. I hired a private investigator. It was humiliating. I had to explain everything, but she listened. She didn't judge. And within a week, she came back with a file thick enough to make me sick. There had been others. Olivia wasn't the only one. Not by far. The investigator found photos, names, reservation histories, receipts, all carefully filed. He had a routine. Different cities, different stories. One woman he told he was a widower. Another thought he was divorced for over a decade. Some were short flings, others long-term enough to leave belongings at his other place. He had an entire drawer of masks he rotated, depending on who he was with. I looked at the file for hours. The pictures of him holding another woman's waist while smiling, lounging at restaurants, walking hand in hand along unfamiliar streets. The James I knew, the one I thought I knew, was nowhere in those images. And yet, he was in every one. I used to think I was his wife and Olivia was the affair. Now I didn't know who was what. Maybe none of us were real to him. Maybe he only ever existed in the lie. He thought I was still in the dark. He came home with the same lazy kiss on the forehead, the same soft voice telling me he was tired from work. I smiled back, served him dinner, laughed at his stories. He had no idea that every smile was a thread tightening around his neck. The woman he married was gone. The one sitting across from him now was something else entirely. I started documenting everything. Every receipt, every forwarded email, every bank transfer. I printed them, backed them up on drives, even uploaded them to a secure folder I named something innocent, Tax Docs 2018. I recorded calls when he was speaking in the next room, saved voicemails from women I didn't recognize, captured screenshots of travel bookings, gift orders, and messages he failed to delete. There was no detail too small. Nothing he did escaped me. At night, while he slept soundly beside me, I'd scroll through the photos from the investigator. I studied them until I stopped feeling pain, until I only felt cold purpose. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about making him answer for what he'd done. Not just to me, but to every woman he toyed with, every lie he weaved, every dollar he stole. I learned to mirror him. I adopted his silence. Played the same game. I started giving excuses of my own, dinners with friends, networking events. I wasn't lying. I was building. I met with a lawyer. Quietly, she said we had a strong case for financial abuse, possibly fraud. She recommended patience. And I agreed. If I was going to end this, it wouldn't be in a courtroom first. It would be in the same way he loved to operate, publicly, with an audience. The plan started small. I made a guest list. Names from both of our lives. Friends, family, co-workers. Even Olivia. I found her contact, disguised the invite as a surprise birthday celebration. I told everyone he deserved to be honored for his promotion. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I had always been the quiet, loyal wife. Now I was simply playing the role one last time. I booked the venue. Ironically, the same hotel where I had found him at the altar. I smiled as I signed the reservation paper. For James, I said sweetly to the clerk. He's done so much for all of us. I meant every word. I rehearsed what I would say. I practiced reading the timeline. I laid it all out. The financials, the double lives, the names, the photos. Each lie was a stepping stone toward the truth. My voice didn't shake anymore. My hands didn't tremble. I wasn't telling a sad story. I was delivering a sentence. By the time the date arrived, I had everything prepared. I stood in front of a mirror the night before, not as a woman devastated, but as someone ready to reclaim her name, her dignity, her power. He had written the first vows. I was rewriting the last. The ballroom was pristine. White linen, gold-rimmed glasses, flickering candles. He walked in smiling, arms open, completely unsuspecting. Everyone shouted surprise, just like I'd told them to. Cameras flashed. People clapped. And he basked in it like a man who truly believed he deserved celebration. He kissed my cheek, played the part, laughed with friends and family. Olivia stood near the front, holding a gift, eyes warm, utterly unaware of what was coming. They hadn't seen each other yet. I made sure of that. I needed the perfect moment, and I'd planned it down to the second. I took the stage with a microphone. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I felt something colder than anger, steadier than fear. Thank you all for coming, I began. Tonight is not just a birthday celebration. It's something more meaningful. It's a moment of truth. Laughter echoed softly, confused. A few glances were exchanged. James smiled, still riding the high of being the man of the hour. I smiled back at him, then turned toward the screen behind me. I pressed play. It began with photos, one of him and me on our wedding day, then one of him and Olivia at the altar. Guests stared. Murmurs grew louder. He froze. I saw his smile falter. Then came the timeline. Side-by-side calendars color-coded. Where he was with me, where he was with her. One business trip, after another, matched with hotel reservations, restaurant bills, engagement photos. Dates, receipts, screenshots. The screen flickered to audio. His voice, smooth and charming, saying, "I love you" to two different women, one recorded from our kitchen, the other from a voicemail left on her phone. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The room was silent. Eyes shifted toward James, then Olivia, then back again. She looked like the breath had been knocked from her body. Slowly, painfully, she turned toward him, confusion bleeding into disbelief. "What is this?" she asked. He didn't answer. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands twitched. He looked around like he wanted to vanish, but there was nowhere to run. His mother stood at the edge of the room, horrified. His boss looked stunned. Friends whispered behind their hands. The perfect man had just been peeled open in front of everyone. Olivia dropped her gift box. It hit the floor with a dull thud. "You married me," she said, her voice trembling. "You told me you were never married before." I stepped down from the stage, slowly approaching him. "And he told me you were just a co-worker he couldn't stand." He tried to speak, to explain, but the noise began to rise. Guests shouting, Olivia crying, people walking out. He crumbled. Right there, in the middle of his perfect party. Face pale, eyes wide, shoulders collapsing. All that charm, all that control, it evaporated. He begged me to stop. Begged her to listen. No one did. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there and watched the man who had written 1,000 lies finally drown in every single one. In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled, faster than I expected, harder than I imagined. The video spread through word of mouth before it ever hit the internet. Someone had recorded it. Someone always does. Within days, it was everywhere. Not just among our friends or family, but co-workers, colleagues, old classmates. Everyone knew. And no one stayed quiet. His job was the first to go. His company launched an immediate internal review after the financial evidence went public. They didn't wait for explanations. They sent a single email. His security badge was deactivated. His name erased from the website. A week later, they released a formal statement. "We do not tolerate fraud, nor do we associate with individuals who compromise the integrity of others." It was blunt. It was brutal. And it was everything he deserved. Olivia filed for annulment almost immediately. Her lawyer contacted mine the next morning. She hadn't spoken to him since the party. She didn't want answers. She wanted distance. Her entire world had collapsed in front of her parents, her friends, her co-workers. I had expected her to hate me, but instead she sent a letter, just a short note. You didn't destroy my life. He did. Thank you for showing me. I cried when I read it. I filed for divorce without hesitation. My lawyer was relentless. We pushed for full financial recovery, and slowly, I began untangling the web he had spun through our accounts. Some money was gone for good, but enough was clawed back. I changed banks. I cut off all his access. The house went on the market. I boxed up everything he owned and left it on the curb. He came once, late at night, to collect it. He didn't knock. He didn't say a word. He just took what was left and disappeared into the dark. His family disowned him. His mother, who once called me her daughter, sent a message filled with shame and disbelief. We didn't raise a monster. I hope you find peace. I'm so sorry. Even his closest friends turned away, embarrassed by their silence. Everyone who had once praised him now looked at him with disgust. Not because of the cheating, but because of the manipulation, the money, the years of lies. Then came the letters, messages from strangers, people who had seen the story, who recognized a part of themselves in the betrayal. Women and men, people who had been gaslit, cheated on, stolen from. They thanked me for not keeping quiet, for refusing to be just another silent casualty. Their kindness filled spaces I didn't know were still empty. It didn't fix everything. I still had nights where I woke up angry, mornings where my chest felt too heavy to move. But I wasn't invisible anymore, and neither was the truth. I had survived the fall. Now, I was learning to live in the wreckage, and finally, to build something real on my own terms. I left the city 3 months after the party, packed my life into boxes, sold the house, deleted his number from every device, and drove without a real destination. I landed in a small town a few states away, quiet, unfamiliar, and exactly what I needed. No one knew me there. No one looked at me with pity or curiosity. I could just exist. The first thing I did was find a therapist. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew I had to. The damage wasn't just emotional. It was foundational. My sense of self, my judgment, my worth, all of it had been tangled in his lies. I told her on the first day, I don't know who I am without him. She didn't flinch. She just nodded. And then we got to work. It was slow. Some weeks I said nothing. Some days I cried for hours over things I thought I had already let go of. But the more I unpacked, the clearer it became. I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been rewritten, molded into someone whose doubts were dismissed, whose instincts were mocked. He didn't just cheat on me. He trained me to doubt myself. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the lies, not even the money, but the silence I had taught myself to keep. Every red flag I brushed off. Every time I made myself smaller to keep the peace. Healing meant remembering who I was before him, and then learning how to be someone new. As I worked through it, I decided to start something. A forum. Quiet at first, just a space for people like me. Men and women recovering from emotional betrayal. It wasn't therapy, just connection. A place where no one had to explain why they stayed, or why they blamed themselves. The stories poured in, raw and heartbreaking. I wasn't alone. None of us were. I still have nightmares sometimes. Still hear his voice in my head trying to twist things. But I hear mine louder now. I trust her. I listen to her. And I promise her every day, I will never ignore you again. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as routine, wrapped in love, hidden beneath years of smiles. That's the kind that hurts the most. The silent kind. The kind that makes you question not just your partner, but yourself. I used to think healing would feel like winning, like getting the last word, or watching him fall apart. But healing is slower. Messier. Some days, it's just making it to the end without crying. Other days, it's catching yourself smiling and realizing you mean. I'm not fully over it. Maybe I never will be. But I'm not broken by it anymore. If you've ever been made to doubt your own reality, if someone has gaslit you, lied to your face while holding your hand, or made you feel like your pain was imaginary, I want you to hear this. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not alone. You don't have to scream to be believed. You don't need proof to justify your pain. If your gut told you something was wrong, that was enough. Trust it. Trust yourself. Thank you for watching. If it helped you feel seen, even just a little, please subscribe, like, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose silence is hiding the same kind of hurt. And maybe, just maybe, this story is the crack that lets the light in.